Howdy, my name is Nonat, and if you're not aware, the Pathfinder 2e subreddit has been hosting a homebrew competition this year. Round 1 just ended a few weeks ago with 10 new divine domains being added through homebrew, and the 10 best have been selected as the winner. I'm here today to review those 10 winners for my channel because I think it'll be fun. These entries have already won. I'm not a judge on these. However, I will be a guest judge on the next round. If you would like to take part in the next round and possibly win, check out the link in the description. You will find the subreddit post for the class feat chain round of homebrews. This round will be all about making a chain of class feats for a specific class that works well, is balanced, and doesn't feel bad. If you think you've got what it takes, click the link in the description and enter it yourself. Now, we're going to talk about these 10 new divine domains, which aren't necessarily attached to any specific deities right now, but if you can make it work with your GM, you might be able to use these on a cool cleric or champion. Now, divine domains don't give anything mechanically outside of 2 focus spells, so that's what we're going to be talking about here today. Starting off with the Black Powder domain. This is an entire divine domain centered around guns, explosives, and alchemical bombs. So keep in mind that a cloistered cleric or a champion could start with these initial focus spells right at level 1, so keep that in mind for balance, and I believe you can get the level 4 focus spells typically around level 8. Ignition Cloud is a really cool delayed effect, which you don't see a lot of in Pathfinder 2e. For 2 actions, you emit a 10-foot emanation of gunpowder, effectively. This coats everything that starts its turn in the gunpowder or even moves through it. At the beginning of your next turn, the powder detonates, dealing 1d6 fire damage to anyone inside the cloud. Now note I say inside the cloud. Even if someone leaves the cloud, there is enough gunpowder left on them that they also ignite for 1d4 damage. Note this doesn't stack, it's 1d6 if they're in the cloud, 1d4 if they left the cloud or moved through it, and it's all on a basic reflex save. The damage scales by 1d6 or 1d4 per spell level. Not too bad. At 5th level, this is dealing 3d6 or 3d4. You know, it doesn't add spell mod, it's not a crazy amount of damage, but with a decent emanation, you might be able to cover a good number of creatures, and even if they try to run away, they'll still ignite on the next turn. Primed Armaments is fascinating because it is a focus spell centered around martial classes. For 1 action, you imbue your weapons with the explosive powder of Black Powder. And for the next minute, so long as you sustain the spell, you get a +1 to attack rolls, and your attacks deal an extra damage die, which is massive. That's like a power attack. Once your character level 13, the attack bonus increases to a +2. On a champion, that would be crazy. That would make them as strong as a fighter, or at least as accurate. Now, the downside is obviously you need to sustain it. If your turn is sustain, move, attack, you're not going to be able to attack more than once unless you're quickened somehow. Now, what is nice is this also works on ranged weapons, and if you reload a weapon, that also counts as sustaining primed armaments. Obviously, this is designed to get more crits with your firearms and making those crits hit even harder. Because remember, that extra weapon damage die is going to be doubled as well. This could possibly be overtuned. I am not sure. It's either overpowered or right on the cusp of overpowered. The thing that makes it pretty balanced to me is unless you're playing dual class variant, it would be really hard for a fighter or gunslinger to get access to this spell. I believe the only way they could get it would be by taking the cleric or champion archetype, and then they could take this at level 16 because you can only take archetype feats equal to half your level or lower. So on a level 16 fighter or gunslinger, yeah, this would be broken beyond all belief. But that's such a high level, I think it's fine. There's so much crazy stuff going on at that point, like heroism, that this is great, but I don't think it's broken. It would allow a war priest to catch up to the other marshals, it would allow a champion to catch up to a fighter, and I think that's really neat. The cooking domain, honestly, pretty similar to the chef alchemist I designed about a year and a half ago, which is really cool, and I like it from what I've seen. Hearth Goods at level 1 for 2 actions basically lets you make an elixir of life that affects fear saves instead of poison. You conjure up a little pastry, and anybody who eats it gains 1d6 hit points and +2 status bonus against fear effects for 1 minute, going up by 1d6 healing per focus point level. This is sort of just a weaker lay on hands, and I think that's okay. You could even theoretically make these in the morning. If you have the way to get multiple focus points back with the refocus feats, you could even conjure a couple of Hearth Goods, hand them out to your party at the beginning of the day, spend 10 minutes and get your focus points back. Or I guess even with only one focus point, you could summon one, hand it out, refocus. Summon one, hand it out, refocus, and your cleric is kind of like an alchemist. Hearty Meal is cool in theory. I don't understand the flavor, which is a really bad pun that was not intentional. By spending 1 minute casting, you conjure a feast that can feed up to 6 creatures, and anyone who enjoys the meal, you are allowed to roll a counteract check to remove any poison or disease effect on them. I don't really know why. It doesn't really mention the food being, like, magically curative. I think it would be cool if it restored hit points. It'd be a really cool way to have a midday short rest, especially if it only took you a minute to summon it. But for removing disease or poison effects, it just feels a little bit random. I think you even could have gone farther with this. Maybe have multiple different types of meals, like 3 different meals you can make, and each one has a different effect that's represented by the food you're actually conjuring. One of them could absolutely remove poison or disease effects. Maybe it's like a nice soup or a tea or something. But then you could make one that just restores hit points, or maybe one that even gives temporary hit points. You could do a lot with this, and I think the 4th level focus spell is a bit underwhelming and could have been more. The Harvest Domain's first focus spell, Plow Horse's Pickup, is a ride to read. Whenever you think you've understood the last thing it does something else, but it's not overpowered. For 1 action, you cast this spell, and for 1 round, no matter what your strength score is, you ignore any speed penalty granted by your armor. Okay, cool. Also, you get to stride as part of that action as a free action. And at any point during that movement, you can pick up any unattended object and either keep it in a free hand, or, even if you don't have a free hand, place it in a pouch. This is crazy. It does so much, but none of it is like crazy powerful. You ignore a speed penalty from armor, you stride once, and you pick something up and possibly store it. That's it. It's kinda cool. For 1 action, maybe you can run over and grab a potion from someone, rather, like if you have an alchemist who's holding out a potion to you, for 1 action you could run over and grab it, all for 1 action. It's kinda cool. Now, I don't know how important the ignore speed penalties of your armor is, because typically, if you can't wear the armor, if you don't have enough strength, you're probably not going to be carrying it, but it's a nice little touch. Reap the Fields is kind of insane. It's really, really cool, but it's really, really weird. For 2 actions, in a 20-foot burst with a 60-foot range, you summon an area of corn or wheat or any other kind of obscuring field of plants. It functions sort of like a fog cloud. Anything inside the field is concealed, and anything outside the field is concealed to anything inside the field. But it is difficult terrain only for your enemies, because the plants fold and move out of the way so your allies can move through them normally. So it is not difficult terrain for allies. And where this really ramps up to just insanity is during the spell's duration, you can take 1 more action to summon a spectral scythe and cut down the field as well as any creatures within. This deals 4d8 damage with a basic reflex save, and then there's no more field till the spell is over. What a wild idea that you can just summon a bunch of wheat and then cleave through it. There's, the suspension of disbelief of like, oh, why can't you just summon the scythe? Why does the field need to be a thing? But I do get it for flavor purposes. It's pretty cool. Is it overly that powerful? Yes and no. It's weaker than a fireball, but still, it's really fun. And if you're going for a crazy farmer champion, I could think of no better focus spell. The Jinx Domain is exactly what it sounds like. It shares bad luck with your targets. For 1 action, you choose 1 creature within 30 feet to make a saving throw. If it fails, then the first time in the next minute that it makes an attack roll, it has to roll at disadvantage, meaning 2d20s take the lower result. But it also applies to you. This is a really interesting mirror aspect that I love because the Jinx Domain is about sharing your bad luck. So if they fail their will save, both of you get disadvantage on your next attack roll. And I love it still that if they critically succeed, only you suffer the bad luck. I think it's fine that the success has no effect, because otherwise there'd be a lot of times where this spell is just flat out detrimental to you. But I love critical success effects from the enemy that negatively affect you as the caster. It's a lot of risk versus reward, and if they crit fail their will save, only they get disadvantage, you do not. This is amazing for a support debuff caster. If you're not going to be casting or using anything with an attack roll, then this doesn't do anything bad. Oh, well, okay, it does affect saving throws as well. But again, if you're backline and hopefully not making many saving throws or attack rolls, you can use this, and you can perfectly set up a spellcaster to target them with a reflex save or something, and they'll be at disadvantage for their saving throw. You can either target them and make them worse at attacking you, or make them easier to hit with certain spells. It's overall really cool. I like the flavor that it affects you as well, so it's kind of risky. I like it. I stumbled a lot through that description and my ideas, but these are all like my first impressions, and I really like it. Conduit of Calamity is a lot. And it's definitely made for a champion more than a cleric, but I think I really love it. As a reaction, if you, the caster, succeed or crit succeed a saving throw, you can spend your reaction to re-roll that saving throw and take the worse result. This sounds awful, but every other creature within 15 feet of you who was also subject to the same saving throw also has to re-roll and take the lower result. So you would never use this around your allies, but if you're a champion in the middle of like 7 or 8 goblins, you just yell to your wizard, "Hit me with a fireball, throw it." And even if you succeed, you might use this Conduit of Calamity, especially if you hear that like over half of the goblins rolled successes. You can use Conduit of Calamity, reroll, maybe you fail, but all of them are way more likely to fail afterwards. This is such a risky focus spell, and I am here for it. The Patience Domain, which I'm surprised is not already a domain, actually. But Wait and Listen at level 1 is honestly super cool. For one action, you ready an action, which is typically a 2-action activity. I don't know if this was supposed to cost 2 actions, because that gets a little blurry. It doesn't say if your next action is to ready an action. It says ready an action. So I don't know if this circumvents the 2-action requirement of ready an action, but I wouldn't think so. I think this should cost 2 actions. But when you ready an action using this focus spell, if the action is an attack roll or skill check, it gets a +1 status bonus. If the readied action is to stride, it does not trigger reactions. This is really cool. I love the idea. I think just some of the little mechanical things are a little bit offbeat, and it is a lot to spend for a +1. This is an entire focus spell to get a +1 from a readied action, but I love the support for readied action. I would almost love to see this as a focus cantrip for a class that could use this every turn. A class with actual support that makes them tend to act more outside their turns sounds super cool and very much fits Patience as a concept. Virtue of Patience is a bit bloaty. I get what they're going for, and I like the flavor, but it's a little bit weirdly executed. As a free action, when you roll initiative, you spend your focus point and take a -20 to your initiative roll, meaning you're going last voluntarily, basically. When you do this, you gain a +1 status bonus to armor class and saving throws for as long as you sustain the spell, and you can sustain the spell as usual up to 1 minute on each of your turns. Now, what's really great is when you sustain the spell, you may recall knowledge or seek as a free action. Pretty nice. But you can't use any feature that goes along with recall knowledge. The first thing I can think of is if you are a ranger with Monster Hunter, you can't use Monster Hunter with this free Recall Knowledge check, so you couldn't share it with your allies or even gain the bonuses yourself. It's good, and it's probably balanced in all honesty, because that's a lot of free Recall Knowledge actions. And if you don't sustain the spell, you get to reroll initiative and put yourself back in with a +2 bonus. Pretty cool. It's fine, but it's really, really bloaty text to just say +1 to armor class and saving throws while you sustain the spell, and Recall Knowledge for free once per turn. It's cool. I don't know if it needed to be linked to initiative. I like the flavor you're going for, but I think it could have just been a focus spell that costs like 1 action to activate and then just sustained in combat. I think the initiative stuff is just a bit cumbersome. Oh my god, talk about bloated. I'm not holding this against it. I haven't read it yet, but that's a lot of text. Oh, these are long sentences. Oh, these are long sentences. Understand the divine. Let me simplify this for you. When you recall knowledge about a deity, you get +2. There's a lot of extra words in there saying you can use crafting instead of religion in this situation or that. If you are recalling knowledge about a deity, you get +2. If the subject of that recall knowledge is a creature related to the deity you are thinking about, and you successfully recall knowledge against that creature with that +2 bonus, you get either, not both, you get either +1 to AC and +1 to saving throws until the start of your next turn, or +1 to a subsequent skill check you make against that creature before the end of your next turn. I assume like intimidation. It's a lot. It's +2 to recall knowledge about deities, and if you are recalling knowledge about a creature related to that deity, you get Monster Hunter benefits from Ranger. That's it. It's a lot of words, and it can definitely be shortened. So Divine Emulation I'll give more of a pass for, because it's a very unique effect, and most of the wording here is flavor and description. For 2 actions and a focus point, you take on an emulation of a deity, turning into the generally accepted form of that deity. For example, if you use this to turn into Sarenrae, you would likely turn into a woman in a large golden dress who is glowing with light. And what this does is change your effective alignment when it comes to effects mechanically specifically. And I think that's super cool. For example, if you choose Sarenrae, you will become, neutral good? Yeah, neutral good if you pick Sarenrae. Or if you pick Asmodeus, you can become lawful evil. And it doesn't change your character's alignment, but it does change how they're affected by things like Divine Lance, or protection from good, or protection from evil. You know, if you as a good party are fighting a bunch of devils with Divine Lance that specifically does evil damage, you could use Divine Emulation to turn into an emulation of Asmodeus, and that Divine Lance will no longer work on you. It's really cool, and changing your effective mechanical alignment is something that does not exist in Pathfinder 2e, and I think that is super cool. The Flesh Domain, allowing you to graft and warp the flesh of both yourself, your allies, and unwilling creatures alike. For 2 actions, you select a target, and depending on if it's willing or unwilling, you can afflict them with a beneficial or detrimental flesh warp. If the target is willing, you can afflict them with a beneficial effect, giving them a +1 status bonus to armor class, fortitude saves, and intimidation checks, which I think are the 3 most flavorful things around growing more body parts. It might make you more stoic, it might make you more fortuitous, and it'll definitely make you more intimidating. And the detrimental effect's actually not that bad. They make a fortitude save, and if they fail, they become flat-footed and take a -1 to fortitude saves, only for 1 round, but that flat-footed can still be great for ranged characters. Additionally, if they crit fail, they get a -2 to fortitude saves, they're flat-footed, and a -5 foot status penalty to their speed. Really cool. I think this focus spell, from what I've read so far, is the most in line with the current domain power level of focus spells. For some reason, domain spells tend to be far weaker than something like a sorcerer's bloodline spells. This one also does heighten to target more creatures, which means if you're character level 11, you can actually target your entire party with this for a focus point, giving everyone armor class, everyone fortitude bonus, everyone intimidation bonuses. Pretty cool. Field of Flesh is neat, though it is a bit underpowered as written. For 3 actions, you pick a 5-foot burst within 30 feet, and it becomes covered in bones and viscera and other nasty fleshy stuff. Now at first, all it does is make the area difficult terrain. As written, even if you use this on a space where an enemy is, it will not do damage to them. Now, if a hostile creature ends their turn in the viscera, they make a reflex save against your spell DC to take a 2d6 slashing damage with some persistent damage on a crit fail. This is fine. You can also expand it like Bless or Bane, which I do think is pretty neat. But I do think it should at least do damage on first cast. As it's written, it only hurts enemies who end their turn in the viscera. Even if you hit it right on top of them and they take their turn, they can just kind of step out of it. Now what is cool is when you expand it, if you expand it into someone, they make the reflex save and possibly take the damage. This makes me think it's supposed to deal the damage when you initially cast it anyway, but as written, it does not. The damage also scales very, very slowly. It is only 1d6 more damage every 2 spell levels and 1 more persistent bleed. So this is not going to do a lot of damage, but over the course of a minute, you can make this area pretty massive by expanding it every turn. The Hearth Domain. I think we're going to see something similar to the Chef Domain, but let's give it its own chance. Summon Bonfire for a level 1 spell is pretty cool, and is similar to D&D 5th edition's spell, I think of the same name. For 3 actions, you conjure a little bonfire made of wood with a flame and a little bit of hit points because it can be destroyed. Any of your allies who spend 1 action to interact while adjacent to the bonfire heal 1d6 and then can't heal again on this specific bonfire. Any creature who starts their turn inside the bonfire takes 2d6 fire damage on a basic reflex save, which I think is really, really cool. The healing goes up by 1d6 every 2 spell levels, which means it's not going to heal that much. Even as a 5th level spell, which you're getting at level 9, this is only healing for 3d6, but it does last for 10 minutes and can heal any number of targets. So you could be in the middle of a big 100-man army platoon, and each of them could take a minute to just heal themselves by the fire, and the total healing would actually be massive. I think it's assumed it just takes up a 5-foot square, same as a medium creature. It doesn't exactly say. It just says in an unoccupied space within range, and it doesn't have an area on it, so I think that's pretty safe to assume. Ooh, I actually think I like Homecooked Meal here more than Hearty Meal from the Chef one. For 2 actions, you touch a willing creature, and for 1 minute, they receive the sensation that they have just eaten their favorite home-cooked meal. You don't actually make the food, but you trick the body into getting the feelings and reactions as though it has. They gain 20 temporary hit points for 1 minute, which is a level 4 focus spell, is awesome, and as long as they keep those temporary hit points, they get a +1 will save status bonus against emotion effects. Temporary hit points go up by 5 per spell level. That's really cool. The flavor of this is awesome, and especially for a cleric or a champion, I don't see them I guess they have conjure food, that's literally a spell. I just love the flavor that, I can't make you your favorite meal, but here, let me help you experience that meal. You can feel as though you've had it, and it's almost the same thing, and it gives you that little bit of energy to keep on fighting with those temporary hit points. Very cool. One of my favorite focus spells we've read here today. And now let's get depressing with the Isolation Domain. Loathsome Loneliness. For 2 actions, target creature within 30 feet makes a will save, and if they fail, they're stupefied 2, success stupefied 1, crit fail stupefied 3, and stunned 1. And it gets a will save every turn because it lasts up to a minute. So, kinda cool. I get what they're going with, and I like this spell mechanically, but I don't really see how this stupefies them. You make them feel lonely and question whether or not they are alone. I just don't feel like stupefied fits this. Like I said, I love the spell. Mechanically, I think it's great. It's a fantastic focus spell, especially for dealing with opposing spellcasters, but I don't know, it doesn't really fit the loneliness vibe. Something that would, like, make them unable to be affected by allies, which it looks like that's what the next spell does. But, Stupefied, I'm not feeling it. Meanwhile, Absolute Isolation, one target within 60 feet for 2 actions, makes a will save. It says make a will save or take 4d4 mental damage. I think this is supposed to be a basic will save against 4d4 damage and take half on a success, double on a fail. But yeah, okay, it says so success takes half damage, so it is a basic will save, they just didn't call it that. On a failure, the target's allies are undetected by it for 1 minute and cannot be detected by any sense except touch. I get what they're going for here. It's really weirdly worded. I feel like it would just be the target cannot sense its allies would be simple enough. I don't know why touch works. I guess just because you can't stop them from feeling touch, but it's an illusion spell. I think you get away with it. I think just saying the target cannot sense its allies for 1 minute, takes full damage, and is frightened 1. I think that would be totally fine. The crit failure is too much. What the? No. Oh my word, no! The target's allies are permanently undetected by it. There is nothing that undoes this. No. That is way too much. Pathfinder 2e, aside from some monster abilities, tends to avoid permanent conditions, especially on a focus spell. Like, yeah, blindness is permanent on a crit fail, but that just removes sight. This removes all senses regarding their allies. Imagine if this got used on a player character. Congratulations, you're no longer allowed to interact with the party. You can't hear them, you can't see them, you can't even smell them. Apparently, you can touch them, and that's it. This is too much. This is ridiculous. I get what you're going for. Make it a minute. Make it, I think, maybe even 10 minutes, sure. Take them out of the fight with their allies, that'd be fine. But permanent? That's ridiculous. And our final top 10 entry from the Homebrew contest for Divine Domains is the Ooze domain, which is already really interesting just from a conceptual standpoint. Pseudopod strike at level 1 for 2 actions. You stretch out and make a melee spell attack roll with a little floppy ooze pseudopod. If you hit them, they take 1d6 acid damage and become sickened 1, and critical successes double damage and sicken 2. This is great. This is totally fine, and I love it. I think you can maybe even get away with making this 1 action. Again, it's a Divine Domain spell, and they tend to be weaker, so this might be fine. But I think making this a 1 action focus point spell attack is totally fine. You give a lot of cool options to an ooze cleric or an ooze champion. I would love this just as like a normal attack. That's super cool. I love having sickened on it. I love sickened. It's one of my favorite conditions in the entire system. And as it gets heightened, the reach increases by 5 feet. I like that. So it starts with no reach, but every spell level, it goes a little bit farther. Really cool, perfectly flavorful to ooze. That's one of my favorites I've read here today. And oozing ascension is pretty much what you would expect. For 2 actions, you're effectively giving yourself the ooze trait. You're not a full ooze, but you gain a lot of the special abilities oozes have. Your speed reduces to 15 feet, but you can squeeze at full speed, and if you crit fail to squeeze, you just normal fail, so you don't crit fail. Weakness 5 to fire, resistance 5 to acid, precision, and critical hit extra damage. Keep in mind, it only reduces the extra damage. If a critical hit hits you for 10, 5 from normal, 5 from the crit, your resistance 5 reduces the 5 from the crit, but will not affect the normal amount. Better explanation is if you take 3 from the normal hit and 3 from the critical hit, even though you have resistance 5, it only gets rid of the 3 from the critical. It does not affect the normal damage. It's kind of cool. It's not overly powerful, but it does last a full minute. As it heightens every 2 spell levels, you'll get a little bit more resistance. At character level 11, giving yourself 10 resistance to acid, precision, and critical hit damage, that's pretty great, not gonna lie. I like the ooze domain. I think it's really, really neat. Maybe oozing ascension could have come with something else, but it also does a lot already, so it'd be a little tough to make it any better. But I really like it. Really flavorful, really goopy, and really overall pretty useful. And those are the top 10 domains from the first round of the PF2 subreddit homebrew competition. If you want to enter, round 2 is going on right now. Click the link in the description and submit your best feat chains for specific classes. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons for making everything I do possible. If you haven't already, click the link in the description to check out Sinclair's library, the Kickstarter. We are possibly hitting 100,000 by the time this video goes live, if not very close. Thank you for all your support. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, no nat ones.